you think about why you've employed those expensive resources, it's to write software for you. Let them do that. That's a big part of this approach, is empowering people to do their best work, focus on what they should be doing.
Welcome to the Team Amplifier podcast. I'm your host, Byron Summerdahl. Here you'll be inspired by industry leaders who build flourishing tech teams. Stay tuned and prepare to be amplified.
3, 2, 1.
Today we're talking about standing in the gap for the people that serve with us. And as tech leaders, it's extremely important that we are standing in the gap for the people around us, because that is one of the things that will help them to flourish. We're going to talk about that today. I'm here with Jon Freedman. Jon, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, Byron. I'm glad to be with you. I'm a technologist. I've been in the industry in the financial services world for 20 years, last 15 years or so, working at some of the world's biggest hedge funds. Now I'm starting a journey as a fractional CTO. So that gives me the chance to work with a few companies at once. I target firms that are in the asset management space with 10 to 20 staff, and I help them grow through technology. So I'm bringing my experience running teams, standing in the gap, supporting those teams and helping them grow, and applying that at a slightly smaller scale, keep things interesting.
Awesome. So yeah, in the financial sector, I guess at least for the rest of the world, the concept of taking care of your people and helping them to flourish, standing in the gap. I hope I'm not speaking out of line, but the financial sector isn't really known for those things. And so can you tell me a little bit more about how, like, what you've experienced in that area of the world in the industry might change my mind about the finance, the money world, and where the bottom line is always the most important thing?
So that's a great point. Some of those stereotypes are there for a reason. It's certainly a high pressure, high intensity environment to work in, but equally technology is there to support the business. And the most effective way to do that is to have a strong team who work well together and work well with our customers. So I've seen quite contrasting organizations. You might have high turnover in one, your average tenure for your engineers being 2 to 3 years. And then when you have a strong manager, a good manager, they build a team around them and people want to stay. And maybe those stereotypes help make the contrast even starker, because when you find somewhere you enjoy working, you'll stay even longer.
Yeah, and it doesn't actually matter, it turns out, what kind of industry it is. We are still working with human beings, and they still need to flourish, whether it's for the bottom line or whether it's just flourishing to flourish. Both are pretty good goals. So, Jon, tell me about a book that you've been reading lately that has made an impact on you.
Sure. So I've picked 2 books. One slightly amusing. It's written by a UK comedian called Bob Mortimer. It's his second book, Hotel Avocado. So I picked that just because it's the first book I've read for a while that made me laugh out loud. I thought that was great. Then a bit more serious and more related to my background, a book by Gregory Zuckerman. It's about Jim Simons, the founder of Renaissance Technologies. The book's called The Man Who Sold the Market. And I'm still reading through it at the moment. One thing that struck me so far is Jim Simons founded this hedge fund, one of the most successful funds of all time, but he changed careers to get to that point. His background was in education, working as a mathematics professor, and then pivoting his career. So especially the time in my career right now gives me some comfort that I can pivot slightly and move away from what I've been doing, but bring the things I've learned into something slightly different.
Right. I'm actually really excited about trying out Hotel Avocado. That's, if a book can make you laugh out loud, which that has happened very few times in my life as well. I don't know what's happened to me. I can barely laugh at a movie. Sometimes things are just not funny anymore that used to be funny. But curious about what might have made you laugh out loud in a book. And I can't wait. Which part was it? Do you remember?
So the whole premise is quite ridiculous, and Bob Mortimer is one of my favorite comedians. So hopefully that British humor will translate across the Atlantic. But the whole thing is just great.
Well, so I don't know if this is a little bit too stereotypical, but I absolutely love Monty Python. And so I really do apologize if that's like going straight to a stereotype. I don't know what Monty Python
those guys
is
are funny,
like.
that's fine.
Okay, good. Well, then I'll throw another one out there. I love Mr. Bean too. I grew up on Mr. Bean. Love that stuff. So Rowan Atkinson is awesome. I can definitely appreciate some British humor, and I will be looking forward to reading that book.
Nice.
That'd be great. Yeah. So if laughing out loud at a book with British humor isn't enough to show everybody that Jon Freedman is indeed human, we need to go through another little round to really just unpack you and make sure that you're real, and not just some superhuman fractional CTO. So it's confession time, Jon. You've been warned about this with this podcast. You kind of know what's coming. So tell us an embarrassing moment in your history as a tech leader, an embarrassing mistake.
So embarrassing for me, for sure. In the past, I've focused in on projects that I thought were interesting and important and going to make a difference when they didn't really have sponsorship. And I get invested, I get my team invested, we're going to build something, it's going to be great. Turns out nobody really cares. We all look a bit silly. The customers, the business turn around and ask us, what is this? When some of the things that they want as technologists, we can be a bit dismissive of, but they're the projects that really do make an impact. So when I was reflecting on this, I tried quite hard to find something embarrassing and funny, but that was a little tricky. With this example, reflecting on it, what I've learned is these are two extremes. And on the one hand, you've got the project that tech really likes, but the business doesn't understand. On the other hand, you've got the project the business wants, but the tech guys kind of shrugging their shoulders. It illustrates the need to work together and have a real partnership with your business, because neither of those extremes is good. If the tech team see an opportunity but they can't express it to the business and can't explain why, that's something to work on. And equally, if the business is really into something but you don't get it, that's probably a bad sign. You need to work harder and understand why it's important, what the value there is.
Yeah. So what does it mean to you then to stand in the gap for your team?
The main crux of it is protection and giving your team mental space so that they can flourish. So it's not, and again, maybe coming back to those ideas of extremes, it's not taking a beating all of the time. It's not about making your team do everything, or as a leader trying to do everything. And you don't want to be on the defensive all the time. Sometimes you need to stick up for your team in a forceful way. Sometimes you need to defend your team in a passive way. That role as a leader in protecting your team is about smoothing out those extremes. So if you're on the defensive, that means there's an issue, there's a problem. Okay, let's understand what the problem is. How do we fix it? How do we move forward? That's the immediate issue. But what can we learn from it? How do we try and avoid getting into this situation again?
Yeah, so it could be the team's fault that something happened. And if there was not someone standing in the gap, then they may receive the entire force of backlash from whoever, the stakeholders, leaders, supervisors, whatever. And so even if they're at fault, doesn't mean that they need to receive the entire force of that response. On the other hand, maybe it wasn't their fault and they need somebody to truly defend them, but it definitely doesn't need to start there. Yeah. So it's kind of, and I alluded to this earlier, but it's kind of a given, but I just want to flesh it out a little bit more. So let's talk about human flourishing, because that's really the theme of this podcast, and standing in the gap. So what do they have to do with each other?
When you have a leader sticking up for you, protecting you maybe is the wrong word, but that gives a pretty strong idea what we're talking about. Your team works in a space of psychological safety, and they can do their best work when they're happy, when they're not afraid, when all of the stereotypical stresses and bad things about a high pressure job, when those are being mitigated, especially in software development, people can get into that flow state. They do their best work.
Yeah.
And standing in the gap, it isn't about breaking the connection between the people in the team and the customers.
Right. It's not about putting up a wall and being the translation layer, right?
Yeah. That's not an effective strategy at all. But breaking up the most extreme reactions in the negative sense, if something's going really well, you just let that straight through. But breaking up those negative reactions and pressure within an organization, within a project, as it builds, increases the frequency and the volume, if you like, of those negatives. It's about making people comfortable and relaxed and productive.
And feel supported and know that somebody has their back and know that somebody is on their side. Whether they're doing well or not, that kind of psychological safety goes a really long way.
If you think about the alternative, the opposite, there's a problem. Everybody's trying to figure out who to point the finger at, who's going to get the blame. That really discourages risk-taking. It hampers innovation. There are some environments, like maybe writing software for airplanes. It's always a very extreme example. Okay, stakes are very high. Even then, I'd argue this psychological safety is important. When the stakes of what you're building are higher, you want to mitigate that with better testing, not with finger pointing.
So, Jon, can you give me some more examples of what you think it might mean to stand in the gap? I'll start with one. I'll give you one that's coming to mind. There are times when the tech leader or the supervisor or whoever is kind of working with knowledge workers, like software developers, they need to stand in the gap for their software developers by providing them that flow state time, just time, like to maybe try to prevent interruptions, to try to limit those meetings or to group them together so that people are not constantly getting interrupted. That flow state is where somebody, especially a software developer, is flourishing probably at their max in their work. And a tech leader can stand in the gap to promote that flourishing almost in real time with very quick results. And I think that's one great way that tech leaders can stand in the gap for their tech teams. Jon, what do you think? What else?
Well, I definitely agree with that. You think about why you've employed those expensive resources, it's to write software for you. Let them do that. That's a big part of this approach, is empowering people to do their best work, focus on what they should be doing. I have an example, we'll talk about it at a high level, was involved on a project that had been running for a couple of years. So a long-term initiative, several missed deadlines already, lots of pressure all the way from senior executives on down. The teams involved, and maybe the fact that there are multiple teams is another multiplier for these problems. There was a lot of finger pointing going on. Everyone was working towards the same objective to get this work completed, but separate teams doing separate things, interdependencies between them. Something's not ready. Well, it's because somebody else didn't do something for me. If you flip that around and say, we're not ready, we're waiting for you, how can we help you to get where you need to be so we can start? You've moved from this adversarial environment to a collaborative one. Hopefully people will respond better. certainly feels better. Unfortunately, that didn't really work out in this case. So I was standing in the gap for my team. When I was talking to the people working for me, I was very clear that I was supporting them, setting clear boundaries with some of the other parties involved about what is and isn't acceptable. And even though that didn't fundamentally change the way the teams were interacting, it did mean that the people in my part of this saw me standing up for them, and it felt they respected me for that, and it helped bond us closer together as a team. So one of the secondary benefits of working like this, not only is your team happier, they should be doing their best work, but that means your attrition rates reduce. People want to carry on working with you. And people often say that people don't leave a company, they leave a manager, leave a bad manager.
Yeah.
I see these as very key characteristics of a good manager.
I think another way that tech leaders can stand in the gap for their team is not exactly thinking about the gap as a gap between the team and everybody else outside. This concept goes deeper than that into sometimes tech leaders need to actually protect the team from itself. Sometimes there are bad actors in a team. And for some reason, for all of the efforts that we've put into this person over here, they have not been able to flip the switch and begin to be a part of the team. And I've experienced this firsthand. Sometimes you have to, like a gardener, sometimes you have to prune a branch in order to allow the rest of the plant to grow and flourish. That's another unfortunate way, but a very important way that we tech leaders can help to promote flourishing in our teams, is by standing in the gap for all of the good actors, and maybe even standing in the gap for the one that needs to leave, because maybe they need to go and flourish somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that might have even happened to me. And I think I got fired at least once I was delivering pizzas, and I'm so glad they fired me, because I needed to go and get a real job. I mean, I'm sorry for anybody else out there that's delivering pizzas. It's a perfectly great job, but I could code. I was a software developer and I was delivering pizzas. I should have been coding, should have been doing that kind of job. So they fired me, and I went and got a job as a software developer. I went and flourished somewhere else. That's what I needed. And so I think that's a very important thing for us as tech leaders to realize as well, where we can help people flourish by sometimes letting them go, and thereby helping the rest of the team flourish as well.
That's a great point. And it reinforces with me again what this isn't. Standing in the gap doesn't mean covering for people. So in that example, and it applies to big teams or small teams, you put a team of people together to work on a problem, there's a distribution of talent, ability, value to that project. Different people in different situations are going to sit on that scale differently. But what's really important is that everybody's being additive. So when you have someone who's not performing, for me, that means they aren't being additive. They have a negative impact on the productivity. So that's when you're correct. You've got to take a fairly drastic action to fix that. Moving from pizza delivery to software to very different jobs. But even within a company with 50 to 100 people, if you have someone in your team and it's not working out, in most cases, you can find a role for them where they will flourish within your company.
Yeah, if the company's big enough, for sure.
As a leader, you can help people find their next role, even if it is external. And I think we talked about this when we were prepping. If you build this culture around you as a leader, people will come back to you. So this isn't a strategy that you use for a year and everything's amazing and you're done, you carry this on throughout your career and you'll find that people that have worked with you before are really excited to work with you again.
Another way that comes to mind that we can stand in the gap for our teams is going back to my example. When I was delivering pizzas and I wasn't doing something right, I don't know, maybe the pizzas arrived smushed. Maybe they arrived cold. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what it was that I wasn't able to do right with delivering pizzas, but they fired me. Now, I'm actually glad that this didn't happen at this point, but as tech leaders, I think that we do have the responsibility to go to that person that's not delivering the pizzas right and work on things. In my case, I'm actually happy that they just let me go out of the blue. I mean, I guess that's what you do at a pizza delivery place. Something's not working, you get rid of them. But I think in our world, we shouldn't do that because it's expensive. And B, we shouldn't do it because it's not very good. It's not humane. As tech leaders, we have a responsibility to pick people up when they've fallen. We need to dust them off and help them to move forward. And we need to train them. And we need to help them to understand where their shortcomings are. Where are their gaps? And help them fill those gaps and give them a chance and trust them to take it upon themselves to try to fill those gaps. If we don't do that and we just out of the blue let them go, besides whatever HR problems we might have, besides whatever reputation our company may get from that, it's just not good. And it's something that detracts from human flourishing instead of promotes.
Definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And I can reflect back on people I've worked with throughout my career and see, fortunately, more of the examples where someone's been underperforming and then coached to be a valuable member of the team. There are a few examples where that didn't work, but I think in those cases, it goes back to a capable person in the wrong role versus challenges around working in a global team. Say, if you're getting requirements from Europe and working on them in the US or vice versa, something that sounds as simple as that can be a real big contributing factor to the reason that someone looks like they're underperforming. Mm-hmm. So you, as a leader, speak to people on both sides, the people who, and this is, again, exactly what it means to stand in the gap in the middle.
Yeah.
You've got the people who are unhappy because they feel someone's not performing. The person who is not performing probably has a feeling something's not going as well as it should. As a leader, you bridge the gap between them, and I feel like 75% of the cases, maybe, you can resolve it and you end up with your customers are now happy. They see, as a leader, you've stepped in, you've resolved their problems, you've listened to them, and you've got a member of your team who respects you and is grateful for the time and effort you put into fixing their problem.
And you've also got the rest of the team that was watching the whole time and was noticing how that tech leader had their colleagues back. Yeah. And it probably had a pretty positive effect on them as well.
That makes me think of leading by example versus making an example of someone. It's easy to pass the complaints through, shouting or not. Again, go back to stereotypes. That's the easy path. But if you invest some of your time in working through these issues and resolving them, or trying to, you have to put something into this. But it can really pay off in the long term.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was hoping to ask you next, which was about why do you think people don't go down this road? I mean, you said that this is not the easy path. The easy path is just to kind of let things happen automatically, ignore situations, let people fend for themselves. I mean, it was them that got themselves into it, let them get out of it. This is certainly the easier way to go. Easier sort of. Not exactly easier in the long
short-term
run.
easy, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe it feels easy in the moment, but the outcomes can be quite the opposite. So why do you think more leaders don't try to stand in the gap for their teams?
Well, I'll have to make a few assumptions about the broader world of companies that I haven't worked at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to assume that there's some companies where the company culture means this is just not an issue and everybody works like this. And there are other companies where this type of behavior is setting you apart as a different type of leader. Being different in a leadership role, that's a risk. Leaders are busy, people in their teams are busy. But as you get onto more senior, more strategic type roles, I find the problems that come are all urgent and all need to be dealt with immediately. Working like this, mentoring people, taking time to spend, in many cases, one-on-one, it is time. It takes time out of your day. So when one of these conflict scenarios arrives, we're going to be looked at as a leader to fix it. Okay, fix it, whatever that means. But then what happens? Is there another fire that needs putting out?
Always is.
Yeah, always is. So how do you balance those firefighting situations with coming back, taking that reflection time, coaching people? I believe it is a worthwhile investment, and maybe coming from finance helps me think like this, but it is an investment that has a medium to long-term payoff.
Yeah, one thing that you just mentioned helped to put something into perspective for me especially, and I hope it did for everybody else. I mean, I would also like to assume that the people that are listening to this podcast that maybe are not yet standing in the gap for their team, it's not because they're doing it out of malice or incompetence or that they don't care about people. I think that if anybody's listening to this podcast right now, and if they've made it this far into this episode, it's because they care about their people. It's because they want to be a good leader. But one thing that you just said is, if I ever fail in this, personally, it is because of this. And it's because as leaders, sometimes we are just putting out fires, one after another, after another, after another. And if there's ever a reason why a caring, conscientious leader is failing to be intentional about standing in the gap, it's because they're too busy. It's because they're too busy fighting fires. So it's kind of like the problem is a little bit deeper for all of us than just wanting to care enough to stand in the gap for people.
It is tough. How do you make that time?
It's probably an entirely different podcast episode just to talk about time management and about dealing with fires.
Well, a big part of it is delegation and building a team around you that you trust. And trusting someone to deal with an emergency means you trust them to have your back, which is exactly what we're talking about.
So let's imagine that some of our friends out there, tech leaders who are listening to this episode, they're now feeling inspired by what we're talking about. They're like, yes, I want to start doing this. I'm going to get my time management under control. I'm going to get my fires under control. I'm going to have some time in my schedule to be able to sit and think about this. I want to get started and get good at standing in the gap for my team. What do you think those tech leaders are going to find along the way? What kind of pitfalls that might they overlook?
Well, there's one obvious pitfall. This can feel a little inauthentic if you try and switch it on at the drop of a hat. I listened to this podcast and had this great idea and I'm going to experiment on you. That's not what we're trying to do here. So the most effective way to do this is through listening. And sometimes underrated skill of a leader. Go back to the conflict example. On both sides, you're listening to the client who's annoyed with something, trying to understand what the problem is. And then you're listening to the other side of it, the person or people they're annoyed with, hearing their side of the story, and then an immediate solution and coming up with a plan a coaching plan or development plan, however you want to think about it, to avoid the same types of things reoccurring. A lot of those steps should be stuff you would do anyway. So maybe adopting this and focusing your leadership on standing in the gap. A lot of it is spending more time listening and then following up on what people are asking you to do.
But it's not about just laying down and taking it, like absorbing all of the negativity from somebody else. It's not just about becoming a punching bag, is it?
No. That does a big disservice to your team and what you're delivering. Again, make some assumptions. If you're thinking about these types of things, how to make your team efficient, how to be a good leader, that should imply you have a good team. You're behind you and they're doing good stuff, whatever sector and business you work in. Making sure you stand up for them is a big part of this. Your conflict might be arising because something's broken. There's a bug. Happens to the best of us. Fix it, put some testing around whatever caused the bug, think about other types of bug, all of this standard software development stuff. That's an easy type problem. If the issue is understanding, so we wanted a solution to this problem and you've given us a solution to a different problem. Okay. Not quite so easy to fix. Once you break that apart, it gives you a real chance to let your team flourish, because however you got to that point, once you understand it and change the way your team works or put steps in place to mitigate the risk of it happening again, the way that team's working is improved, the results for your business is improved. Everybody should be feeling better.
So, Jon, help out our audience just with a little bit of example, just to help drive this home. I know stories are really powerful. They help everybody to understand a concept and to internalize it even better. So tell me about a time when standing in the gap for your team led to unexpected results.
Well, we touched on the internal team dynamics around this and having someone who's underperforming. I can think back to an example around that where I was concerned, my peers in other areas of the business were concerned about an individual's performance. And when we worked through that with them, they were concerned about how they were able to perform at the organization as well. But the end outcome was very positive. The way that work was being given to that individual, we changed that around a bit, put more emphasis on explaining some of the context around it. And that individual did really flourish. They're still in the role now. Several years ago now, we thought wasn't going to work out.
I have a very similar situation with one of my developers years ago. I want to say like 10 years ago. So it's probably safe to tell. But I met with her and I was determined to help her because I hired her. And in a way, I was kind of selfish. My name was on the line because I hired her. And we had already spent several months of salary on her trying to wait for her to kick it into gear and start performing, start doing some things that we were asking her to do. And she just wasn't able to get it done. I still don't know exactly what was happening, but I wasn't comfortable enough to, at that time as a new leader, to try to dig into that and figure out what it was. But I just had a meeting with her and I just, with as much compassion as I could muster, because I was determined to help her succeed, I just said, look, I don't know if you are enjoying this job. I don't know if you feel stuck, if you feel like you have picked the wrong career. I'm paraphrasing, by the way. It was too long ago. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it must have been magical what I said, because the next day she turned into a super developer and was like not the next day, obviously, but like in very short amount of time, she started to really show passion for her work. And as a result, I think she started to perform, and beyond performing, she was flourishing. So like you, I mean, I can absolutely second what you're talking about. Standing in the gap for somebody might mean you're not standing in the gap between them and everybody else. It's that you are just going to bat for that person. And you might have to have some uncomfortable words. But it's a crucial conversation for that person, because it might mean the difference between living day to day in this doldrum of life and potentially flourishing and waking up every day happy to go to work. It's a very important thing that you did for your employee and that I did for mine. And I hope that can inspire everybody else out there to really take this seriously and start standing in the gap for their employees.
Definitely.
So, Jon, how can people connect with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active there. I've also got my website, quantfin.co.uk. Happy to chat to interesting people, and anything that piques my interest, I'm always happy to get involved and share my expertise and knowledge.
What if they're not interesting, Jon? Would you rather them just keep moving along?
Well, everybody's got some nugget of interest in there somewhere. I just got to tease it out.
Note to self, make sure I say something interesting to Jon. Speaking of interesting, this has been a really interesting conversation. I really appreciate your time, Jon. This has been great. I think that we've got a few more topics in us. We can probably get back together and do another recording session and pull out another episode. Hopefully we can do that someday soon.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, man. All right. See you next time.
This has been another episode of the Team Amplifier podcast. Thanks for joining us. Now, get out there and be a team amplifier.